how's it going, my friends? It's time for another special edition of Fight in Focus, presented to you exclusively by FITE. I am Jon Alba, and we've got a great episode of Fight in Focus for you today because we are speaking with a bona fide legend, WWE Hall of Famer, Madusa. How are you, my friend? Thanks so much for hopping on here.
My gosh, amazing. And thank you for having me. So when you say Alba, I automatically think of Jessica.
Of course.
So any relation? I'm sure you get that, right?
Yeah, I've never once been asked that in my entire life. No relationship to Jessica Alba. Unfortunately, Jon Alba is... I could have used that on dates. I could have used that as part of...
Yes. See how you guys... how your mind works. I see. And a lot of that is in my book.
Wrestling is the biggest work in the world, and I should have used that in my back pocket. But anyway, it's okay because we are talking about your book, The Woman Who Would Be King, the Madusa Story. That is coming to everyone, available March 28th by ECW Press, co-written with Greg Oliver, and the forward by the legend himself, Paul Heyman. I cannot wait to get my hands on this book, and we're going to be talking about it on Fight in Focus today. I guess my first question for you would be, why now? Why is now the time to tell your story?
That's a great question. So, after 40 years of entertainment, and I've tried to publish this book probably 3 or 4 times. And it's that gut instinct where it tells you, and that's been my moneymaker, that it wasn't time. It wasn't time to publish it. But when when ECW reached out and said, hey, we're interested in publishing your book. And a good friend of mine, John Alba, was just finishing his book with ECW Press, and so he got me with Greg Oliver, and everything just fell in place. And what a better time to do it was during the pandemic. So some people made babies, I made a book. This is my birth, yes. The Woman Who Would Be King, the Madusa Story by ECW Publishing. So it goes something like this. The great Greg Oliver, a year and a half of putting this together. Let me say this. He had to have patience and talking every day, getting to know each other. There were days I'm sure he just wanted to oh my gosh, woman, give me a break, because I am a hands-on type of woman. I love control, and I got to have my hands in everything, and I got to know what's going on. So I had to learn a lot of things to trust, let him do his job of making my story more of a success. And the one thing about this book is that I definitely wanted to be fact checked. I know that sounds weird, even in my own stories, because after 40 years, of pro wrestling and monster trucks, you know your stories. They're my stories, how I experienced them. Like if you and I went out and had lunch and we saw a bird fly, we would definitely see 2 different stories, right? So when I say fact check, be careful what you ask for, because Greg Oliver is a fact check king. So he had to get the exact dates, the exact times, and where it was. And because I couldn't remember all of the, every place I was at, or every venue I wrestled at, or every venue I drove a monster truck in. So he had a lot of work on his plate. And then what was important was to have a foreword. Who would know me the best, especially being a very dear friend of mine, and one of my best friends in the business would be Paul Heyman, right? We go all the way back from AWA days, and that's in the 80s. So even back in VHS tape days. So yes. So when I asked him, he was more than honored, and he was just taken back. And you can't assume that someone's going to do it either. So I was very, even asking a friend, because it's a lot. And so he said, Deuce, do you have a title for your book yet? And I said, gosh, Paul, I've got one or two or maybe three. I just can't, I just can't nail it. And he said, The Woman Who Would Be King. I'm like, what? Wait, what? What? He's like, The Woman Who Would
Oh,
Be
he's been
King.
thinking about it for a while.
Oh my gosh. Like, how does that even come off? And so we spoke and we thought, and everything that came together, I've been the queen of cards long. I might as well be the king of everything. No,
I'm just
there's a
curious.
reason for that. It's in my book. And so I thought it was perfect. And I said, your blessing? He said, absolutely. The Woman Who Would Be King. I'm like, okay. And that's what it was. The
I'm
Medusa
just hearing
story.
that in Paul Heyman cadence. The woman
Yes.
who would be king. And just,
Yeah. Right.
that's so fantastic. I love that.
Uh,
We'll talk more about Paul Heyman in just a second here because I know he's an instrumental part to your story.
mm,
But I love what you said about the fact checking because I had always, even in journalism, that some people say there's two sides to every story, but there's actually three sides to every story. There's what one
mhm.
person experienced, what the other person experienced, and the truth that's somewhere in the middle of all of that. So how
Well,
did you
wait a
go?
second. Let me stop you there.
Mhm,
So I agree with you. There's my story, and then the person I was with,
mhm.
their story and how they saw it. But the truth is, both their stories put together. So I don't want to say my story, their story, then the truth, because then it's saying that both stories are wrong. So I believe in both parallels
Sure.
and in the combination of more of an explosion. So that's what was so unique about Greg. Greg would just call them, try to find them, email them.
Mhm.
Let me tell you, gathering some of the past skeletons,
Yeah.
yeah, scary, but it worked out. I was very adamant to tell him that, look, these are my experiences. This is my story. It's not about all of you. You know what I mean? It's about my story, my experiences. So I'm not here to throw people under the bus for 5 seconds of fame because I would have to hire a big Twitter army. You know what I'm saying? I mean, nowadays you just got to, it is what it is. The book is not going to relate or resonate to everybody out there, but it is a very well written, eloquent. Oh my gosh, it is. I have to say that it is a very well written book, and it's all around like I am because I have ADHD. So it goes from A to M to C to L. But each chapter keeps you so engaged that you're like, oh my God, I remember that from chapter 2. I got to keep going because it keeps the stories like that. So it doesn't start off, oh, I was born in, Minnesota and I was a little girl. And I know this captures you right away.
I always say pro wrestling is best when you reward the audience for paying attention, and I think it's kind of similar.
Ah,
I think it's kind of similar when it comes to reading a book too.
yes,
So how
sir.
how do you go about that process? Because there's a ton of people out there who have wanted to write books. I've tried even starting writing books on certain topics, and it's so hard to formulate those stories in an engaging manner. So how do you go about determining what is book worthy from a career that has spanned so many different places over such a long period of time?
That's a great question. And I love new questions because I've been doing a lot of interviews. And so
Thank
if people do their diligence and come up with these great questions, I really get enthralled in it. So I would feel that everyone has a story, right? And it's how you say it or what your approach is. I don't like going with fads. I like going with um my I like going with the story because I've also written children's books that are not published yet. And so I think it's the uniqueness of your personality, unless you're fiction or you're a fantasy writer or however, you decide to do that. I think on a biography, I think being honest to the point where I changed names in my book just because life changes and I believe people change for the better. So, not that they get a free pass or anything because of maybe some wrong things that they've done in their life. However, you hope that they've, taken a better route. And so I was not like trying to be careful, but I was, people change to where they have family life and they have children and that we're not privy to their past, maybe life that they were a horrible person or, you know what I'm saying, or doing bad choices. So when I've experienced them in my life, and I changed the names and some things to protect those kids
Mhm.
because they're very innocent.
Sure. Yeah, and that makes
My
sense.
s- my stories are very real, and this book I probably could take each chapter and write a book about each
Oh,
chapter
wow.
because really, John, I how do you put 20 years of wrestling and still I'm very active and going back and working with NXT or showing up on Raw or working with the NWA now as a producer. I just how do you still get all of that in there in 20 years of monster trucks? You can't. So let me hence the word that this is a biography. It isn't just a wrestling book. So the people that might get discouraged thinking, oh, there isn't all this juicy stuff and oh, there's good stuff in there. But let me just tell you about these chapters.
Well, I
I could write a book on each chapter.
I
It
think
starts
that
off,
you're
go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, I mean, there's like over 21 chapters and there's over 300 pages of this book.
Wow.
That's a big book, right? So we pushed the envelope. We pushed it to the limit. And I mean, from the first chapter called Granny, and she's 100 years old, by the way.
Wow.
And this woman is a spitfire. And so when he interviewed her, I think that was the longest interview he did. He said that woman wouldn't stop talking. You know what I mean? So, I mean, and it goes all the way down from lessons learned. And it's an amazing book. So I know there's a lot more I can talk about as far as monster trucks. Now, I gave monster trucks a little bit more in the book only because people didn't know that much about monster trucks and they don't know a lot about my career on that side. So I just gave a little bit more there.
Well, and you've done so many different things, and that I
Mm.
think makes you a great person to write a book because with a book, you're trying to enlighten your audience at the end of the day. If you wrote a book about stuff that people already knew, what's the point of reading it in the first place? So,
Funny you say that because all of my interviews, like back in the day when we didn't have social media and our social media we were like really relying on the magazines back then, right?
yep,
And a lot of them just wrote what they wanted to write without even interviewing us, so those weren't even our words half the
right.
time. So I would be thumbing through them going, what the heck, I didn't say that. And so I had a really good relationship with George Napolitano and Bill Apter and Fumi Saito, and they wrote for a lot of great magazines. So, I mean, I was pretty happy with all those. But let me tell you, that was our social media back then, and that's what we really relied on.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day here, you're a storyteller, right? Like in wrestling,
Mm.
that's what you do. Professional wrestling is storytelling at the end of the day. And even with sports or monster trucks or whatever it is, I've always viewed as someone who's covered sports my entire career. Sports are a form of storytelling in their own right. They're not as, predetermined as professional wrestling,
Hmm.
but it's a form of storytelling. So that is inherent to you.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that you have so many stories tell here that people are going to learn a lot about. What is your favorite part of the book or favorite thing that you cover in the book that you think the audience will take something away from?
As I was saying before, and I want to finish, is that all of my interviews throughout my careers, if someone were to go back, every interview was basically the same. I said the same story. No one taught me to do that. No one, it was just something I felt comfortable because I knew in the back of my head that I really was going to change the world or something. And I was going to be a star, or I'm going to be very good at what I do and I'm going to be bigger than life. And I don't know where it's going, but maybe someday someone will make a movie about my career. This was way back me thinking in the 80s, like people told me I was crazy. So most of my interviews were all the same. So I got really lucky that I never really exposed my life. I was very personable. Like I kept a lot of things to myself. So I feel that there's a chapter in there that I've kept very close to my vest that I never experienced. I never shared with anybody, right? And I think their eyes are going to be pretty well wide open when they get to know me as a woman and the things that I went through and tried um, uh, to do for being a mother in motherhood. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Well, and I think when you're doing a project like this, it does require that degree of vulnerability that you probably
Mm.
haven't shown, especially as someone in wrestling, where in wrestling there's this thin veil that kind of blocks everybody off from the public life. And maybe it's changed a little bit with the advent of social media, but it
Mhm.
exists for so long. Was that difficult for you to open up in that different kind of way? Because you are someone, I don't want to give too much away for people who are going to read the book for the first time, but you are someone who faced a lot of adversity growing up, especially in your childhood.
I did, but I'm not a victim, but I am a part of that. And I share a lot for the first time. And doing so, you are going to have people and things happen in your life that are going to clap back or, just have negative feelings because you're exposing your story. And because you're exposing your story, some of that is exposed. And I think people feel guilty. And I don't think things should be totally stifled in your life like I kept. I kept everything in of my life inside my whole entire adulthood up until this point. And I pick and chose, if I ever wanted to talk about anything to who I wanted to, if I did. It's not really super healthy. I found a way. And I think survival is the best revenge. And when I say revenge, it's not like I was trying to go out and get to anybody. Survival of overcoming these adversities is an amazing revenge for your own self. And knowing that I got through so much, this is not just personal. I'm talking about business and this crap that back in my era, the things that just women had to either choose to do or not to do to get where they wanted to their career. My my biggest downfall is I didn't accept crap from men, and it really stifled my career in so many ways. I didn't give in and did a lot of the misogynist crap, and I was rebellious in that way. When they told me no, I respectfully found another way. And I think that's what really stands out as in my performance of life.
Mhm. And it's so fascinating you say it in that way because you do look at your prime era in the industry, and it is truly remarkable given all the circumstances of the industry at the time and the stigmas that existed at the time that you were even able to reach the level in which you did reach. And now it's unfathomable seeing where women's wrestling is in such a great, healthy place, only getting better by the day, seemingly. I mean, how do you feel that that era that you were part of, you, Bull Nakano, some of the other trailblazers from that era, how do you feel you guys helped lay the groundwork for what we are seeing today?
Well, I believe that we have to go through those adversities, the pinnacles of careers and lives and choices. We are we become our choices because we all have a choice in life. Sometimes things are thrown at us that are not fair, and there are circumstances that are very very aggressive that are more difficult to overcome or to get through or to get out of. Um, and I feel that every era of pro wrestling and monster trucks had that stigma, and it took a person or two to stand up, to feel the wrath, to make that difference. It's just not me. It's a collaboration of women and men, even men, that made a difference, to make a difference, to have it become where it is today in pro wrestling and monster trucks. And so I feel absolutely rewarded by seeing the outcome of where it is today because of the things I had to do and go through, which is unfortunate, but you can't feel like you're always owed. I felt jaded for a long time, and it does do a number on you, trust me. But I found a way to self-heal and to separate myself. And I don't know what it was. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. I didn't have great guidance or that great, that family, to, the father image and the great mother image, and to do all of that. I was absorbed by the motivation and the environment that I chose to keep. I was a loner a lot. And so I think those first experiences, like finding out who, what's his name, Tony Robbins was way back in the day when he had his cassette tapes, and I would play them in my car and drive 300 miles, is what I think that was the start of everything. Yeah, Tony Robbins back. I still have the very first cassette tapes.
That is a 90s throwback if I've ever heard one. How about
dude? It was so amazing. And then fast forward, that was the mindset that kept in my head. And so it was from Norman Vincent Peale, and it just went on and on and on, right? I just kept finding these great motivationalists. And that was my drug. That was my drug. And so when each era would change and you saw it growing each time, and you knew that you put in the work to help evolutionize this, right? And so the women today are in a great time and a great spot, because for the first time ever, and I don't know why it took so long, women are signing $1 million contracts. It took this long. Like, what the heck? I didn't even make 6 digits up until I almost retired. You know what I mean? When I say 6 digits, it was only like $100,000, and men were making millions.
Yeah.
It's unheard of. I was good. It wasn't good to me, period. Yeah. But I love the business, and I have so much, love for it, and the kids that are in it and still see their, oh my gosh, when I see somebody, the passion that they have in it, it's just, you can spot the ones that are very, hungry and determined, and that will do things, that take the notes, that work 24/7 on their craft. And those are the ones you just know.
Who are some of those people?
I can't say that now that I said that, because then that's just putting that, that's like favorites.
That doesn't mean that there are any, that people.
No, I can't, because I'm a producer for a show.
Well, then let me ask you this then. What kind of fulfillment are you getting out of that at this stage in your life now, where you are so hands-on involved and working with these individuals? Does that help you reconnect with that part of you that, like you said, like the industry didn't love you as much as you love it? Now you're able to connect in a totally different way.
I'm able to connect with the kids, men and women, in a way where I can act. I'm known as cutting through the chase, straight shooting, and this is, guys.
Yeah.
Point blank. This is, if you don't follow the steps to do this, it isn't going to happen. And just point, instead of sugarcoating things. I hate when people sugarcoat things just to make you feel good, but just give me the straight line. What is A, B, C, and D, and I'm going to do it, right? So I'm a matter of fact with the kids that way. And I been told that they so appreciate it so much better than just beating around the bush. Like, hey, how was my match? Yeah, it was great. Could have been a little better. Okay, thanks. No, I'm like, okay, this sucked. Okay, so let's sit down and talk about it. Why did this happen? Blah blah blah. Or else, as an agent, you're going over a match and you tell them, okay, look, this is the finish. This is how, we'd like to see it. And oh, by the way, big boss man, he definitely wants this, part in the finish. So, and then you talk to them and they come back and they say, okay, we like this, 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 and this, and this. And I'm like, that's not what I said.
Right.
That's not how it's supposed to go. But if you feel that's what you want to do and it fails, guess who's it going to be on? And we're going to learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want this finish, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to tell you again, this is how it goes. So when they go out there and they change it on their own, then they've got, oh yeah, then there's a price to pay. Trust me. Not only do I hear it from my boss, right, my ass gets reamed, then I go to the kids and say, look, you screwed up. You don't get a second chance. You go back to the back of the line and start over again.
But that's coaching, right? That's, you see that across all sports.
I like hard motivation. I do. I don't like things just handed to me or given. Would life have been easier if I was a second generation? I don't know. I see the struggles of kids in our business that are second generations, and I don't think it's any easier for them either.
Yeah.
So.
Well, where do you think we're headed with pro wrestling? Because I have this hypothesis that here, let me get philosophical for a second.
Oh, okay.
We're talking with Madusa, by the way, the co-author of The Woman Who Would Be King, the Madusa Story, which is coming you March 28th, as you can see in her screen there, available on Amazon and elsewhere too. I have this hypothesis that pro wrestling in 2023 can be just about anything, as long as you make it make sense and there is purpose put behind it. I mean, I love a great, hard-hitting, strong style match. I also do a podcast with the man who created Broken Matt Hardy and anything in between. What is your ideology on what wrestling is in 2023 and where we're headed in the future? Because it's very different than how it was, back in the prime of your career, even to that point.
Well, I'm really glad to see where women's wrestling is today, because finally my style is today. Mm-hmm. I was this style that's hard hitting, that is believable, that could work. And I did hour-long matches, where I'd like to see more 15-minute, 20-minute matches between women that can have them and start, building storylines. That's how you're going to get better as well. I also see wrestling, it is so scripted right now, and it boggles my mind how each move has to be scripted. I always tell the kids today too, I mean, God forbid if something happened, if your finger went on a joint, or something happened to your ankle, but yet you still could finish, and you screw up your script, you're going to forget where you're at, and then the match falls apart. You've got to have that ability to be able to create a dance in there and be able to just go and call it as you can. You'll be able to tell the seasoned, wrestlers that are able to do that. Now, Bull Nakano and I we didn't talk in the ring. And so, I mean, I was very blessed and lucky to have such an amazing woman just to have a beautiful dance with. And a lot of, a couple of the girls was like that. But as far as the future, I see more like acts, like not play acts, but almost like segments. You know what I mean? Like movie stuff, like more set. You're seeing that more and more happening, because it is a scripted show. It is, it's about engaging those fans and keeping them interested. However, people love the wrestling part of it. And I think that's why we've seen, because you see more talking. Some people, I shouldn't say some, a lot of people are voicing their, I hate the table signing contract crap and all of this. It's just blah, blah, blah. But I think if they can be more creative in how they do their vignettes, the build up beforehand. I believe that if they can create a show, maybe they do segments where they're maybe it's a short little series, maybe it's 8 episodes of your two fighters, and you build up this show, right? And it's like mini series, and then they have matches. You know what I mean? It's like a show. They fight and they do their thing, and I don't know. I see it going towards that way, more
More
Hollywood.
serial and cinematic. I understand
Yes,
what you're
very.
saying. Yeah, and I think you're on the cusp of something. I mean, you've learned so much and interacted with someone like Paul Heyman, as you mentioned before, and he writes the forward for this book. Paul Heyman, somebody that I feel like every pro wrestling fan loves Paul Heyman. Find me someone that dislikes Paul Heyman, and I'll call you a liar. But
How would you like to see Paul Heyman, like Bobby the Heenan and what's his name, with
Jim Cornette
Jim Cornette, all together, like get them doing a shoot?
just doing
Oh,
a shit. Yeah.
wouldn't that be amazing?
Oh my goodness! I mean, we're talking 3 of the best of all time here, and Paul
Yes.
writes the forward for your book. Uh, you don't, again, without totally spoiling what he says in it, what can people take away from what he has to say as part of your story?
His forward is pretty minimal to the fact of he explains to people how we met and how we've become friends and how the trust is built over time and how and where we're at today. Yeah, you'll just have to read
Yeah.
it. I'm pretty blessed.
There's so few people in wrestling. I always am told this by so many wrestlers that you can really count on a hand how many people you consider close, genuine friends in that circle.
I am not kidding. You are your environment. You hang around crap, you become crap. And I've just truly believed that. And I believed in, I mean, I've learned so much in the last 5 years that you, what you surround yourself with and what you choose, and even your social media, I mean, has a big effect on your life. And that's including family too. Please don't get clouded by just because they're family that it's all healthy. You've got to choose on what and how you want things in your life. Remember, you are the king of your castle.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. And this is the woman who would be king. Just the tie-in. Hey,
Hey, if Becky Lynch can be the man, I am the damn king.
you are the king. I love the sound of that. Before we wrap, I do want to ask you a little bit about the monster truck stuff because I know that is a really
Yes.
part of your journey, and it's probably a part of your journey that a lot of wrestling fans may not be super familiar with. So it's something, by my understanding, it kind of. I was talking to Mike Weber about it. It kind of just struck you out of the blue, and you became hooked to it. What kind of parallels did you find between that adrenaline rush that you got from monster trucks that you did from wrestling?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if it wasn't for Mike Weber, by the way. So he's the culprit in this, and a good one. So it was about 99, and I got a call from Weber, and Mike was like, Deuce, what are you doing? And I'm like, Mike, how the hell are you? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, yeah. So you're still wrestling? I'm like, yeah, but I'm out. I don't like the way the women's wrestling is going. They were promised to build this roster and this whole thing here. Nothing's happening. I just, I wanted to change the trajectory of women's wrestling for the good, what I wanted, but I'm not doing any more barbecue crap matches. I said, I'm out. I'm retiring at 2001. And plus I got word from, some friends that Vince may be buying, and I didn't want to redo that contract beforehand because then the Madusa name may have been, transferred over, and I own Madusa from the very beginning. I trademarked that like 40 years ago. And so, so there's that. And then, so Mike's like, we need a woman that's like, you're a gearhead. I'm like, yeah, I drive, I ride Harleys and 4-wheelers and whatnot. And he's like, oh, would you like to drive a monster truck? And I'm like, dude, I've never even seen one. What are you talking about? And so fast forward, it's in the book, by the way. And there I was, introduced me. I started driving. 2 weeks later, I was entertaining kids, 60,000 every weekend, 20 years later. And I'm like, who does that, right? So the parallels between monster trucks and wrestling, let me put this straight first, and it's in my book, is that when I first started Monster Jam, it was like legit racing and winning. I'm very competitive, by the way. And so I'm like, oh yeah, I found my niche. This is great. I mean, wrestling was entertainment. Now I can really go for it. And so after they sold to Feld Entertainment, then it became more like a circus and like wrestling. And I kind of felt the change happening again. And I knew it was my time to start getting my things together and like, I'm going to retire from this. And the story about Feld Entertainment is in there too. I don't throw them under the bus or anything like that, but I just didn't agree with a lot of things. Being their pioneer woman and the only woman they had for so many years and winning 2 championships, racing against Dennis Anderson, and the story's in the book. You'll love it. I mean, it is similar parallels. I cannot tell you, wait till you read the story. It'll blow your mind how the two actually connect. It's pretty interesting. Yes. I can't even tell you because once I give it away, I give it away. It's just amazing.
I get it. I'm all about it. Well, people can read about it March 28th in your book, The Woman Who Would Be King, which is going to tell your life story. And I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it. As my last question for you, what is the one thing you hope people take away from the book?
Well, ECW Publishing, they hired 200 readers and they sent out the arcs of the book first. And so what they did is, they would get our reviews back, the 1 through 5 stars. Well, we've been getting 4 and 5 stars. So I am so blessed for that. And the main things that comes back is that they didn't realize how could a woman go through so much and overcome this and still be together. Basically, there are some emotional parts in there that just people say it's, how could you, how did you do that? So as I said in a couple of the chapters, I definitely will pick out chapters and write another whole book, because on wrestling alone, I could write another whole book. On monster trucks, I could write another whole book, but the main takeaway is how motivating, how inspiring. And it really inspires others to keep doing what they're doing and to dig deep. And the part about women and women empowerment, I'm so for that. But I'm also for women wanting empowerment and across the board with everything. You know what I mean? We want equality. But if we want that, then we better be ready for that, right? So if you want a nice job in an office building 50 stories high and make good money, and you want equality, well, then get ready to go spread some concrete. Make some money. I mean, you just can't have the best. I mean, you want it all, you got to have it. So that's my way of thinking that there's so much for women out there. Try not to put yourself in just a box, because if you can imagine it, you can do it.
I love it, and I'm going to love this book. It is The Woman Who Would Be King, the Madusa story. She is Madusa. Thank you so much for joining me on Fight in Focus. I appreciate it. I know Mike Weber appreciates it, and I know all of our fans here on Fight really appreciate it as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
This has been another edition of Fight in Focus, presented to you exclusively by Fight. We will see you next time.